said, I greet you in the name of my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to our program today. Again, I will say welcome, welcome, welcome. At this time, we will have our purpose and our prayer guide by Pat Bellingraf, our mission coordinator, spiritual growth.
Good morning. First, we'll say our purpose together, and it's fine if you want to remain muted, but if you would, I would love it if you would say the purpose together with all of us. United Women in Faith shall be a
community of women
whose purpose is to know God and to experience freedom as whole persons through Jesus Christ, to develop a creative, supportive fellowship, and to expand concepts of mission through participation in the global ministries of the church. And then today, from the prayer guide, I'd like for us to lift this mission in prayer. It's called the Killingsworth Residential Center. It's in Columbia, South Carolina. And I Googled them this morning to see exactly what they do. And it sounds like, again, a wonderful and amazing use of our pledge dollars. It is a unique community residence for women who are emerging from crisis situations, such as alcohol or drug abuse, incarceration, mental and emotional problems, violence, assault, or a family crisis. So remember the Killingsworth Residential Center in Columbia, South Carolina in your prayers today. And then I wanted to open our meeting with a prayer, and I'm going to read a prayer that I found on the Discipleship Ministries website yesterday. It was written for Earth Day, but I decided it was so appropriate for today. And it's written by the Reverend Derek C. Weber. And so I want to share this prayer with you. And before we start to pray, I'm going to want to share a scripture with you, and then I'll share the prayer. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. That's from Romans chapter 8, verse 19. Let us pray. For what does creation wait, O God of all that is? For what does this planet, abused and ravaged in our hunger for more and more, wait? Does it wait for a moment of sanity? Does it wait for a sense of urgency? Does it wait for clarity and resolve and action toward preservation? Perhaps all of these and more, we confess. But maybe above all, creation waits for the beloved community. We all wait and long for the kingdom of which Jesus spoke so regularly, where we see life in all its wondrous diversity as the glorious gift that it is, where we see how interrelated we all are as creatures of one world, one planet, where we acknowledge that suffering in one part of creation is suffering in all, where abuse and oppression and prejudice and hatred against one people is destroying us all, where we understand that a lavish lifestyle, a standard of living in comfort and extravagance for some, is forcing others into cycles of poverty and deprivation. Creation waits, O God of today and tomorrow, for resurrection. May we be born into a new way of living, a new way of being in the wonderful world you have given. May we live respectfully, humbly, as it befits a people who follow a crucified, risen Lord, in his name and to his glory. Amen.
I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for this morning. Her name is Elizabeth Lee. She goes by Liz. Liz serves as a United Woman in Faith executive for economic and environmental justice and climate justice lead. Her primary area of work is to advance climate justice through the Just Energy for All campaign with members, churches, society, through training, programming, partnership, cooperative engagement, advocacy, and solidarity. Liz represented Liz represent United Women in Faith at the U.S. Climate Action Network, Interfaith Center for Corporate Responsibility, the Transit Equality and Network, and other spaces. The next voice you will hear, that is Miss Liz Lee.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a privilege and joy to be with you all. We'll be going really into the topic of caring for God's creation and through just energy for all. I know I've connected with some of you, and it's the first time connecting with many of you. So look forward to our interactive conversation together. And thank you again so much for the invitation, Ms. Margaret, Ms. Donna, and all of Holston Conference United Women in Faith.
And before we begin our program, we're going to have local testimonies regarding climate justice. And we have 3 invited guests to give their perspective here in Holston Conference. We have Carol Green, who is the Peace and Justice Coordinator for Holston Conference. We have Reverend Bill Nickel, who is the founder and director for Nero Ridge Earth Literacy Center. And Liz Upchurch, Senior Program Manager, Energy and Environmental Policy with the Tennessee Valley Authority. So they will come in that order and provide for us their testimony.
Now, am I on? Thank you for giving me voice. Climate change is real and it is continuing. However, there's a more immediate existential threat. We can be wiped out in an afternoon. Do you know that we're living at ground zero? The New Hope community in Oak Ridge was replaced by the Manhattan Project to make nuclear bombs in 1945. Besides being used on civilians in Japan, the Oak Ridge Reservation is one of the largest environmental cleanup Superfund sites. Sick workers are still seeking compensation. The highly enriched uranium materials facility, the Fort Knox of weapons-grade uranium, was breached by 3 peace activists back in 2012. Dan Zach's book tells all about it in Almighty. Back in 1986, the United Methodist Council of Bishops, led by the Roman Catholic Council of Bishops, called us to defend creation. For a long time, our social principles have said we need to move on with nuclear abolition. And I have used that when I've gone to all the hearings in Oak Ridge. In 2004, the United Methodist Women had an action alert to help us support the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 2009, the Council of Bishops called us in hope and action for God's good creation. And this is an excellent resource. I hope you are aware of this and will use it. Starting as a Peace with Justice Coordinator for Holston some time ago, I'm not currently doing that. That's Pat Bellingrath's turn. But for years, I've been trying to get the conference to take action on nukes in our parish. I've been walking the talk with the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance. We are part of the international campaign against nuclear weapons. And we won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. And ICANN helped this treaty to come about. Nuclear weapons are now illegal. There is a treaty now on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and some 86 nation states have signed on, and all we have to do is get our senators to add the United States of America. Unfortunately, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville is complicit with the modernization of bomb making. All we have to do is dissuade them. The Russian war on the Ukraine is bringing more attention to the threat of nuclear weapons. The sunflower is a symbol of nuclear abolition. In 1994, Ukraine gave up their weapons, the nuclear warheads, to Russia in an agreement, the Budapest Agreement, with Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom guaranteeing security. That didn't work. At a closed mine, as they were closing these mines, at a missile site in 1994, generals from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom planted sunflower seeds. Sunflower plants absorb the radiation out of the ground. So this has been used, seeds have been sent around for Hiroshima, Chernobyl, Fukushima. And as the blossoms follow the sun during the day, that seems to be a sign of hope. But alas, that agreement didn't hold. And alas, we live at ground zero, where we are sitting target for Russia for an attack with nuclear weapons, or more likely cyber. But we are very vulnerable where we are. The Lord help us. And I'm calling for, again, the time to abolish nuclear weapons is now. Thank you.
Hello, good to be with you all. I'm here at Nero Ridge Earth Literacy Center in Washburn, Tennessee. Nero Ridge is now celebrating its 30th year of operation as an Earth Literacy Center. And what we are about basically is to study, teach, and demonstrate a sustainable way of living. Our three cornerstones are sustainability, spirituality, and community. And so what we have here is an opportunity to live our life in as sustainable way as we possibly can. All of the buildings that we have built are off the grid, solar powered. We try to do things with different kinds of, excuse me. We have 3 or 4 different things going on at the same time right now. I'm sorry to interrupt. We try to do every way that we can to show a sustainable way of living, anywhere from straw bale construction with our main lodge, which sleeps 30 people, which right now has folks living in it. And that's why I was interrupted just now. The opportunity for college students to come from all over the United States to study Earth literacy here with us is what we really are about. From far away as Notre Dame, Miami and Florida, University of Kentucky, that come for a week at a time and stay with us. We have our gardens where they actually prepare some of the food that we will be eating. And then we take them on tours of our community where 45 home sites here, where people live in a sustainable way as possible. But we do not, we are not perfect by a long shot. And this is where I got the title Nero Ridge. It comes from the Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, who talked about throughout his life the narrow ridge. And what is that narrow ridge? It's not a geological formation, but as Buber said, it's a place in the heart. And if I'm walking on the narrow ridge, I'm treating everyone, regardless of race, color, or creed, I'm treating them as a thou or as a you. And if I slip off of that narrow ridge, as we often do, then I'm no longer treating people as thous or yous. It's difficult. This is where community comes in, that we have to help each other to stay on that narrow ridge. And then in 1923, Buber went a step further and he said, even if I treat the natural world as an object, I'm no longer on the narrow ridge. And that was a pretty radical thing for this old Jewish philosopher to say back then. But it's where we are today in our relationship with the natural world. I took 15 young people up last night on top of the ridge, a place we call Inspiration Point. We laid out under the stars and we understood our relationship with the rest of the world. Why is it that we say the Earth when it's not the Jupiter or the Mars? It's because we have this concept of dominion, that we can dominate Earth, and we make it an object of the preposition the. The same thing is true as we consider our relationship with people. We have to be very, very concerned about the way we live our lives. And it's not just the way we live our lives, but it's the way we die. Here at Narrow Ridge, we have the first natural burial preserve in the state of Tennessee. And what's the natural burial preserve? Again, we're trying to honor our relationship with the planet itself in the way that we die. How do we normally do it? I'm not trying to put anybody else down at this point, but what we're saying here is no embalming, no metal casket, and no concrete vaults. Here again, in the rural areas of East Tennessee where we are, a lot of this formaldehyde that is put into our bodies for embalming, it will eventually go down into earth and pollute our water, our drinking water. We put enough formaldehyde in the ground every year to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. For what purpose? We never embalm people. It only started back during the days of the Civil War when men and boys died a long ways away from home. And the only way they could get the body back was to embalm it. Previous to that, there was no embalming. So here at Narrow Ridge, that's the way we believe it should be even today. Metal caskets, we build enough metal, put it in the ground every year to rebuild the Golden Gate Bridge. We put enough concrete in the ground every year for burial so that we can have level cemeteries. We put enough concrete in the ground every single year to build a 2-lane highway from Knoxville to Atlanta. Why do we do this? Well, basically, it's maybe just because we want to have this cemetery that looks kind of like a golf course. If you come here to the Narrow Ridge Natural Burial Preserve, you'll see the graves are mound up. And as over a period of time, they will settle. And then that cemetery itself will return and go back to forest. We don't charge. We don't charge for burial. We've buried homeless people when we buried very, very wealthy people. We welcome donations. Right now, the Natural Burial Preserve, we have people coming from all over the United States to see what we're doing and to begin to spread this way of caring for God's creation. In fact, we're going to have to expand our cemetery into another 5-acre area. We have 550 acres of land that we preserve here at Narrow Ridge, and we have 44 home sites where people live in community, trying to share this relationship. When the college students come from all over, they stay with us for a week at a time, and we immerse them into the natural world, taking them into all of these different places. I think my time may be up, but it's been good to be with you. Thank you.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Liz Upchurch here. I work for Tennessee Valley Authority. And Bill, back in the 90s, I was an AmeriCorps member with Lindy Turner, and remember coming to Narrow Ridge, and it was really impactful. And so thank you for sharing about that. And Carol, also thank you for your points. Thanks for having me today. Also, I'm glad to be here. I live in Knoxville, and I've worked at TVA about 20 years. So many of you probably know Tennessee Valley Authority started in the 30s, part of the New Deal, to really help bring this region out of poverty and address some of the major issues that we were having with flooding and erosion control. And we also provided power. So we are a public power provider. We're nonprofit, we're federal. So everything we do, we run off of power revenues. And so we have a mission that's trifold. It's energy, it's environmental stewardship, and economic development. And we do that throughout our we have most of 7 states that we serve. And so I think most of the Holston Conference is within the Tennessee Valley Authority service territory. And we work in partnership with local power companies. So in Knoxville, that's Knoxville Utilities Board, and other places around the region have additional local power companies that provide power to your house. So we are a large power generator, and we recognize climate change is one of the biggest problems that's facing us as a country, as a world. And we need to make changes to better position ourselves for long-term success of our planet and humanity. So for TVA, we know that historically, and not too distant history, electric power generation was the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions, which lead to climate change. Recently, I think transportation sector has overtaken electricity generation as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So we are working, and since 2005, we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions from our electricity generation by over half. And we have set goals to be 70% less from 2005 by 2030, so in about 8 years, quite a bit less. And then by 2050, we aspire to be net zero carbon in our electricity footprint. So we understand that continuing to provide low cost, reliable, resilient power that's also low carbon enables other sectors in the economy to also achieve lower carbon emissions. And so, for example, as we are also working to help electrify transportation, electric vehicle charging stations, because switching from gasoline to electricity or diesel to electricity greatly reduces the amount of carbon emissions coming from transportation. So that's just one area. But as we go forward, we're working on, we plan to build 10,000 megawatts of solar by 2035. We're evaluating to close our remaining coal plants by 2035. We are expanding, looking into additional technologies and long-term storage. So as we have solar, it's great when the sun's shining, if you can use it all. If you can't, we'd like to be able to store it and be able to use it later. So we're exploring new technologies in that space. And continuing to work on reliability, low cost, and low carbon for our overall power system. We also, we're working on, I know you all are going to be talking about energy justice, and we're working on additional meaningful engagement of people as we are making these asset changes in communities to be able to really engage local people so that they have a say in what's happening, and at least their input is being heard and gathered as we're making those changes. Some of the things we're also doing, we have a 1 million tree planting program. So we're planning to plant 1 million trees across the valley over the coming years. We also work to provide low-income energy efficiency. So for the people that really need the most help with the largest energy burden, we do have programs in place and partnerships with local power companies and with the states to do weatherization and help people lower their electric bills and have more comfortable and safe homes. So that's a really important program. And I think just for individuals, things that you can do to help reduce you all know this probably, but work on energy efficiency in your home, change out your light bulbs, tune up your HVAC. If you buy new appliances, make sure they're Energy Star certified, some of those kinds of things. Turn your thermostat up a little bit in the winter, in the summer, and down a little bit in the winter. Wear a sweater. Some of those things will really help your own electricity bill. And of course, you can do things like plant trees in your area and areas that you have control of. It'll not only provide shade for your house, but the uptake of carbon is helpful. And then consider next time you get a car, maybe look at electric. I think they're becoming more mainstream. There's more charging opportunities coming. And so it's something to look at as you guys are, as you make your next decision on vehicles. So again, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate being able to be here. And I probably can't stay the whole time, but I'm really pleased to have been able to join you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for that. The comments that were just shared, it's so important to be grounded in climate change, energy justice around our own communities. We could talk about it in such a big level. So it's, again, a privilege to be with you all. I'm just going to start sharing my slides now, and I'm also going to put on a timer so I can be mindful of the time. And again, it's my privilege to be with you all. I am the Executive for Economic and Environmental Justice and the Climate Justice Lead at the National Office, United Women in Faith. And as many of you may know, climate justice is one of our main issue areas, one of our two. The other is racial justice. And I believe last year you actually focused on racial justice. And our primary focus through climate justice is the Just Energy for All campaign. And so we're going to start off with a quick poll. Actually, we're going to do prayers of the people. So if you can join me in the congregational response, and you are welcome to unmute. So why don't I begin, and please respond and hear our prayer. For all those around the world who have lost their homes, livelihoods, or communities to the climate crisis.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For our non-human siblings whose habitats are destroyed by the effects of greed and accumulation.
Lord, hear our prayer.
prayers.
For decision makers, that their choices might create a more beautiful, whole, resilient world.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For our own church and communities, that we might be bearers of hope and resilience in our community, a place of refuge in the midst of crisis and disaster.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Thank you for joining me in prayer. We are a people of prayer and a people of faith. And this resource is created from the Creation Justice Ministries, which used to be part of the National Council of Churches of USA. And then in their restructuring, this became a separate organization. And so United Women in Faith, Church and Society of the United Methodist Church, American Baptist, many other denominations are part of this group. And we, United Women in Faith, provided funding, in fact, for this effort, the creation of the resource. And I want to commend this resource to you. There are various themes throughout the year, and this year's theme is Weathering the Storm, Faithful Climate Resilience. And you can use that. There's a Bible study component. There's an insert that you can put in church bulletins. You may want to use that within your United Women in Faith activity, or you may want to offer that as something that as your church or district or conference that you can do as well. I want to thank the testifiers earlier today, both to Carol Green, Reverend Bill Nickel, and Liz Upchurch, about speaking about even the connection of nuclear, right? We need to address that, that treating people in an I-thou relationship, and also very concrete ways and considerations around burial that's really helpful to our need to transition to renewable energy, energy justice, weatherization, electric vehicles, when possible, right? So these are all important things. And we're going to spend time today collectively thinking about, well, what does it mean? Why should we care about creation? And why does Just Energy for All matter? And as you know, as you may have seen in the advertisement and promotion, I'm going to be talking about 5 reasons why we may want to think about Just Energy for All. But to begin with, I wanted to begin with getting a sense of who is with us. And Reverend Tim, thank you so much for being the tech host. If you could launch this poll. And so with this poll, you'll see 4 large questions, and there are and multiple choice answers, so you can choose more than one. And the first is, have you ever participated? Ooh, it says United Methodist Women, but it is, we are now United Women in Faith. So have you ever participated in any of our Just Energy for All webinars or trainings? Second, what issues are you concerned or passionate about? Third, where does your energy come from? Fourth, why should we focus on climate justice and just energy solutions? And if you're trying to wonder why you can't submit, just scroll down. Keep on scrolling because there are a number of questions that we're asking. And if for some reason the chat option is difficult, you don't see the poll, please note your comments in the chat box. And I think many of you, we have about at 80% participation. If you could note in the chat box which state you are calling in from or joining us from. I know that the Holston Conference has 3 different states, and we also know that there are a number of you who are from outside the conference. So just help me get a better sense. Okay, so what I'm hearing from, in terms of the respondents thus far, about 38% of you have participated in some sort of Just Energy for All training. 52% have said no, and 10% have said maybe. That's really helpful. And then we're gonna go back to these polls later on, but I'm gonna just finish that, and I'm gonna ask you to finish that if you haven't done so already, and I will look at the states. So we have many from Tennessee, okay, Virginia, Tennessee, Virginia. Okay, Tennessee and Virginia are the 2 mostly from Tennessee. Okay, and Tennessee, Georgia border. Okay, wonderful, thank you. And if you please type in if there are any other places, and why don't we dive in from there? I wanted to note that we have a number of Just Energy for All trainings and webinars. Each year we offer a 3, and it's now a 4-part Just Energy for All 101 training. It's really the baseline. Why should we care? What is an unjust energy system? What is a just energy system? How can we be part of the solution? And that'll be offered again in the fall. So you are all invited to join that. We also have monthly Just Energy for All webinars every 3rd Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern. And it ranges from topics, and we bring speakers and our own United Women in Faith members to speak on the issues of just energy, just transition, transit, air pollution, solar panels, installation, funding. If you have a topic that you want us to talk about, we try to collect those and bring those, so you are welcome to join us. And we have just launched our monthly Just Energy for All working group, which is every first Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. For those who are actually interested in working on this, and you're thinking, well, how could my unit get involved? What can I do at the district or conference level? Or, I'm part of this conference. We have 3 states in our conference, but maybe I want to connect with others throughout Tennessee or others throughout Georgia or Virginia. And so that's an opportunity to strategize and think together as well. So I wanted to note those are some opportunities. And I'll share links about how you can get involved. And now we get a better sense of who we are. Let's go into who we are more personally, right? Of what drives us, what guides our decisions, what are our values? So think to yourself and reflect on this question: what is an important value or 2 that you live by? Now, if you have a journal or a notepad, you are welcome to write it down somewhere. If you are someone who prefers to draw, you can draw this out. If you prefer typing, that's fine too. Just take 30 seconds or so about an important value or 2 that you live by. You may want to think about why that's important too. and I'll be doing quite a bit of talking during our time together. And I'm also a New Yorker, so I speak rather quickly. And it might be a generational thing as well. So if you see that I am speaking way too quickly, please just use your hands and do this so that I can elongate or note in the chat box. Chat box may be helpful because I don't see everyone on the screen. Okay, we're going to go into our first breakout group so that we spend time together to hear from one another. And we'll be in groups of 2 to 4 persons. And please make sure everyone who wants to speak can. And for about 2 minutes or so each, or about a minute and a half, share your name, where you're located, and the value and why it's important to you. Reverend Tim, if you can lead us into that breakout group. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some good, meaningful conversations. I wanted to share about my own values, and you're welcome to type in the chat box what values are important to you and why. For me, 2 important values since I was young was fairness and justice. It might be because I am the second child and the youngest of cousins on my dad's side, and a girl in a deeply patriarchal extended family. And for those reasons, at least for those reasons, I felt like I wanted to make sure that people were treated equally, that our aunties and girls would have the same quality of food, education, and access as our main cousins or men, and that we weren't being ignored because of age, birth rank, or gender. And in terms of justice, scripture and the Bible had been a key anchor for our family. Where we were experiencing a very challenging immigrant life when we immigrated from Korea when I was 4. And then we have daily family services, Bible study, Bible reading, a scripture, song, a hymn, and Lord's Prayer and time for prayer. And I found great comfort throughout scripture of God as a God of justice, a God who cares for the oppressed, who condemns wicked acts, who fights for the causes of the widow and uses prophets to direct communities to seek just relationships with one another. And I invite you to type in the chat box your own values that inspired you and guided you. And this relates to our first reason why we should care about just energy for all. It's our biblical and Methodist call. When we look at scripture, there are values that guide and direct how we are to live and be in the world and how we are to relate with one another. The greatest commandment, love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I want to take a moment to focus on our most famous passage in scripture. And what is the most famous passage in scripture? I asked one of our colleagues and she said, oh, it's Jesus wept. I think that's the shortest, not the most famous. But this is a passage that I, and perhaps many of you, were required to memorize growing up. I know we couldn't, in our vacation Bible school, we couldn't get lunch unless we recited this passage. If we couldn't recite it properly, we were sent to the back of the lunch line. And that passage is John 3:16, for God so loved. Now, what did God love? For God so loved, well, I put the answer there, people, sweet tea, or the world. And from what I remember about this passage, especially from sermons and Bible studies and conversations, it was that God loved me, right? That God would send Jesus into this world for a sinner like me. And so the answer would be, if I had these choices, it would be people. And I was trying to find out, what do folks in Tennessee, Georgia, and Virginia really resonate with? And I heard, I saw country ham, maybe. That's more Tennessee, apparently. So I put sweet tea, because that might be something that all of you resonate with. But what does it say actually in this passage? It actually says, for God so loved the world, that God gave God only Son so that everyone who believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. So it doesn't even say for God so loved humans, which in the Greek root would be anthropos, right? And some derivative of that. But instead, it says for God so loved the world. And in the Greek world in scripture is actually cosmon, from the word cosmos. And this is where cosmology, the world, the universe, the firmaments, and all that is in it is related to. What we hear about the scripture passage, about reading this passage through an anthropocentric, through a human lens. I was navel gazing. When Jesus was sent for all the world and all of creation, I was thinking about just me. Further, this passage, after this passage, I didn't have to memorize the next verse, John 3:17. And I wonder how many of you were asked to memorize it. Because this passage says, John 3:17, indeed, God did not send the Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. The word saved in the Greek in scripture is sothē, from the word sozo. And it can also be, it could be translated as save, but also deliver out of danger into safety, to rescue, to heal, to make well, to restore to health. This salvific purpose of Jesus, of salvation, for why God came into this world, was to bring about healing, not only for me and right relationship with God, but for all of creation. And if the mission of Jesus was to bring healing into our world, then as disciples, this means following Jesus's ministry is for us as well. This ministry of healing and right relationship with God, absolutely. And also for the healing of creation. It's then no wonder that the first commandment that God gave to humanity in Genesis makes a lot more sense, right? For me, it was to be stewards of God's creation, to be caretakers. And not because we are Lord over it for our own gain, but because God created creation and delighted in it, and that we too are part of creation in itself. So discipleship and Christian witness is caring for the trees, the water, the earthworms, animal biodiversity, and praying for God's blessings, not only for my human neighbor, but fellow creatures, the fauna, the gardens, the mountains, the streams, who are all part of our habitat. So for me, reading this scripture in its context within the larger canon grounds me in terms of, well, wow, right? Why should I care? This is not a political issue. It's not just for the tree huggers, but it's for all of us in terms of our call as Christians. And this view was also within our Methodist DNA. John Wesley, founder of Methodism, noted that our relationship with creation is not one of lords, of control, but of stewardship. And he notes, a steward is not at liberty to use what is lodged in his hands as he pleases, but as his master pleases. He is not the owner of any of these things, but barely entrusted with them by another. Now, this is exactly the case of everyone with relation to God. Right? So this is a stewardship perspective. And those sentiments and values are noted within the UMC social principles and the book of resolutions that provide guidance and direction for our relationship with creation. I would recommend for anyone who are interested in some light reading to take time to read the social principles and the natural world sections of the book of resolutions, because it really gives us guidance both theologically and also very practically and things that we can do. And here are the words from the social principles in the natural world. All creation is the Lord's, and we are responsible for the ways in which we use and abuse it. Water, soil, minerals, energy resources, plants, animal life, and space are to be valued and conserved because they are God's creation, and not solely because they are useful to human beings. God has granted stewardship of creation. We should meet those stewardship duties through acts of loving care and respect. John Wesley concisely captured his values in 3 simple rules: do no harm, do no good, and attend to the ordinances of God. Or as some more recently have put it, stay in love with God. Now, why am I bringing all of these things up around a conversation around climate justice and just energy for all? How do these things connect? Because basis that when we examine with our values, John 3:16, our social principles, Methodist principles, the 3 simple rules, it might lead us to change our system and an invitation for us to be part of really being a part of that healing work that Jesus calls us to. And what is that? Energy. What would you do without energy? Here are images that show the effects of power outages across Texas. This is from a year ago, where multiple rounds of winter storms in February 2021 at one point left more than 4 million people without power in the middle of a winter storm. So I'm not sure if you're able to see the changes. And think about your favorite thing that you enjoy doing most. What is that? Could you do that without energy? And why don't you type in what some of your favorite things are that you enjoy doing? My favorite thing is hiking. And in some ways, one can say, well, hiking doesn't require energy beyond my body. Oh, someone said gardening, wonderful. But I live in New York City. The trails are generally at least an hour away, which grieves me deeply. And I need to drive to get to the trails. And to get there, the car that I use is powered by energy, in my case, gas. And when I'm there, when I'm on the trail, there are paper maps for more and more. It's on the phone, hoping I have some satellite connection, right? And the phone requires energy for my use. So some of you have said gardening, watching movies, golf, reading, bird watching, spending time with family, walking, swimming. Many of you are readers. Wonderful. I have some great book resources. Using the computer, right? So things require energy. Almost everything we do. And we rely on energy. Now let's look at the poll results of, do you know what your energy comes from? And here are the results of the poll results. So you had said 73% of your energy comes from fossil fuels, 18 nuclear, 9% renewable, 14 had said you don't know, others, please note them in the chat box. You are welcome to do that so we get a better sense of what your energy landscape looks like. And I'm going to share what our landscape looks like at the national level. This is from the EIA, the Energy Information Administration in the US, and just data that's very helpful in giving us context. So our energy breakdown for 2020 is 79% fossil fuels. So before that, 2019, it was 80%. So we've gone down by 1% in fossil fuels. You can see the breakdown, about 10% coal, 34% natural gas, 35% petroleum or oil, about 9% nuclear, and then about 12% renewable energy. And if you're saying, well, most of my energy comes from electricity at the national level, this is the breakdown of electricity. So you'll see petroleum really plays a very small use of our electricity, and about 60%, 60.5% comes from fossil fuels. That's gone down from 62% in 2020. And renewable energy has been increasing, so it's now at 20%, and nuclear at 9%. And I know there's a few state specifics. I'm just going to go through this data really quickly. In Tennessee, about 72% of your energy comes from fossil fuel, and 50 from oil, 20 from natural gas, 2 from coal, and 23% of your 23% is from electricity. And in terms of electricity, 40% from fossil fuel, and then you have nuclear at 48% and 12% at renewable energy. You'll notice that it's different from the national average. And for those of you in Virginia, if you're wondering, most of the energy, 72% comes from fossil fuel. And then of the 23% from electricity, 57% comes from fossil fuel, right? So there's a sizable fossil fuel location. And then 37 from nuclear. And so it's a little different in nuclear. Georgia, I think we have someone from Georgia or on the borderline. So that's 67% from fossil fuels, 23% of that is from electricity. And from there, the electricity, 64% comes from fossil fuels. And in most of your cases, in all of 3 states, majority, as was noted earlier, of the use comes from transportation. And then it's either industry or residential. And if you want to look more at the data, you just go to the Energy Information Administration. I can share that link with you later to find out more about your energy use. Given that energy plays an outsized role in our lives, and even though we may take it for granted, it's important to reflect on how this energy system is connected to our values. Does the energy that we use, the energy economy we are part of, does it do no harm? Does it do good? Is our energy system fair or just? Does it harm God's creation in ways that it does not, it undermines creation and what God's intended purposes are? And what can we do to be stewards? And how can we change our system if they are not? And unfortunately, this might be unsurprising to most of you or many of you. This leads to the second reason. The current energy system is unjust. It is harming God's people and creation. As noted earlier, it's the main source of the climate crisis, and climate change is caused by human activities over the past 150 years that has released planet warming greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. And that's like placing extra layers of blanket on the earth that leads to its overheating. And the primary source of emissions comes from fossil fuels, as you see, like coal, oil, and natural gas. And the energy sector, accounts for nearly 75% of worldwide emissions, followed by agriculture. So we really need to address our energy use and source if we want to address the climate crisis. Climate change has led to more severe natural disasters. So according to NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in 2021 alone, there were 20 weather and climate disasters with losses exceeding $1 billion each that affected the US. I want to pause here and invite you to comment in the chat box over the last 5 years, or that you can remember, how has your community been impacted by climate change? So you'll see in this area, there is impact almost throughout the United States. And this is really talking about the billion-dollar weather disasters. There's been lots that are under $1 billion as well. So please type in the chat box how your community has been impacted sometimes we hear that climate change is, over there, right, in the Pacific Islands or in the Philippines, but not happening in our community. I'll just share from my own context. Last September 1st, is the date I will never forget. First, it was when my dad passed away unexpectedly in the morning. And as many of you who've experienced someone close to you or an immediate family member who's passed, the morning is crowded with logistics immediately for funeral preparations and letting people know. We were actually at the funeral home later that evening where my father's body was transferred to at that time when the Hurricane Ida began to pound throughout the Northeast, right? It had come in the South Central and then had moved its way up to the Northeast. And by the time we left, we were stuck. There were emergencies warning saying there's going to be flash flooding to stop, but we couldn't stop anywhere because we were on a highway and on local roads. It was not coastal flooding, right? But inland flooding. And what happened was that because of the sheer amount of rain that pummeled our area, it led to inland flooding that our systems could not absorb quickly enough. And members in our church were stranded in highways. We were able to finally get back home, barely. But others in my church had to be rescued by the police in New York and New Jersey, right? They waited for hours. They were not safe. Their cars were destroyed. Their homes were destroyed. And in my area, in Queens and in Brooklyn also, homes were flooded so quickly that some of the residents who lived in basement or garden dwellings could not escape because the water was pushing in so quickly that they could not go out. And it led to their deaths. The funeral home where my dad passed, was placed, was too flooded, so it actually caused problems around funeral preparation and my dad's funeral itself. So we're being impacted, and a number of you have noted flooding, mountain fires, severe storms, economic implications, right? Tornado Alley, thank you, crop failure, food shortages. So the implications are huge. It disrupts our daily lives. Why else should we be concerned about the climate crisis? It impacts many of the things we care about. Now, I noted in the chat, you had shared in the poll, and Reverend Tim, would you be able to share the poll results? Thank you. And if you scroll down, let's look at the things that you care about. Human rights, poverty, economics, jobs, homelessness, racial justice. These were all 50% or more. Racial justice too, health, women's issues, environmental climate, food security, children and youth. All of these things ranked as important for our communities and for you specifically. And the reality is that what you and I are passionate about will likely, if not already, be impacted by climate change. The climate crisis is an injustice multiplier. Food and water security are under threat, with some areas facing up to 1/3 decline in per capita crop production with 2 degrees Celsius warming. Up to 1 billion people could be forced from their homes in mass climate-driven migration by 2050. That's less than 30 years from now. Global warming is already severely threatening many ecosystems and biodiversity. And as many of us may have felt, I know when I go to the gas pump and also when I buy food, costs have gone up, right? Because of the war that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. A lot of the revenues that they generate to support the war comes from fossil fuels. And US governments and others have been putting in some degree of sanctions, not all. There's lots of ways that Russia continues to receive revenues from fossil fuel exports, but there's been some attempts, right? And so prices have been going up because of fossil fuels. And so there's this tension. We need to get away from fossil fuels, but costs, if we get away from fossil fuels, do we have the renewable energy systems and infrastructure to get there? And I'll speak more about that right now, but it is impacting, right? our energy use, the cost of that impacts our bottom line, our pockets as well. It leads to food insecurity and movements. And if you think about the health impacts, you'll just see here about how increase in temperatures leads to allergens. And for me, at least in New York, where I'm located, allergy season is present and it's gone up, and my allergy medication is not actually working as effectively in years past. And so it will be more frequent and more common. And tick season for us is here. So that leads to Lyme disease and other issues as well, right? The United Nations IPCC, okay, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report noted that we must completely, if we want to address the climate crisis, we must completely eliminate fossil fuels by 2050. That's 28 years, and move towards renewable energy. And I noted a number of other things that we need to do, including weatherization, so like lowering energy demand, faster electrification. And the thing is, just because we electrify doesn't mean we've addressed the issue, right? Because most of our electricity in the United States is from fossil fuels still. We need to change our consumption, more plant-based diets, and protect and restore ecosystems. The Secretary General of the United Nations has said the most systemic threat to human security and humanity is not nuclear war, though it may feel like it at times, or famine, or malnutrition, or gender-based violence. So these are things that I'm deeply concerned about, but it's actually climate change. Because again, it's an injustice multiplier. So this is being spoken about at various levels, right? Because of a catastrophic impact that it can have. And with that, because fossil fuels is the main source, we need to move forward. And so that means, think about your own homes, your churches, complete phase out of fossil fuels. What is your energy that you are using for your cars, for your building? Mine is fossil fuels, right? I live in a building. I don't control how we get our energy. So there are systemic issues that are at play. We're going to talk more about that later. And we in the United States have a particular responsibility because we are only 4% of the global population. But cumulatively, over the years, we've contributed to 25% of emissions. So we have a greater responsibility. We have to do our global fair share because countries least responsible, our sisters in Mozambique, in the Philippines, even in our United Methodist connection, are being harmed by our energy policies, our government policies, our use as well. And we can also be part of that solution. So that's climate, right? But so some of you may be like, okay, climate, scientists, but I'm really concerned about other things, right? But it's not, fossil fuels is not, and our energy is not only the main source of climate change, but it's detrimental to our health. One study estimated that more than 8 million people died in 2018 from fossil fuel pollution. That exposure to particulate matter from fossil fuel emissions accounted for 18% of total global deaths. That's about almost 1 out of every 5 deaths due to fossil fuel emissions. Climate justice is also a racial justice issue, and we can see that very clearly through COVID. The reliance on fossil fuels affects who's been getting sick and dying from COVID. Car-fired power plants, fossil fuel-powered cars, trucks, boats, oil and gas wells. All of these are located predominantly located where there are higher percentages of communities of color. And a nationwide Harvard study determined that people living for decades in counties with higher levels of air pollution is 15% more likely to be killed by COVID than someone who with 1 unit less of fine particulate matter in the area. And who lives in these areas? According to EPA, 46 of the 50 states, communities of color are exposed to higher levels of dangerous air pollution than their white communities. African Americans have 54 times higher exposure than the overall population. And is United Women in Faith committed to racial justice? Here's an opportunity for change. Because when we address the air pollution, it drastically, within weeks, changes air pollution levels. It leads to health indicators, right? Fewer hospitalizations, fewer asthma rates, and exacerbations as well. So this climate justice and an energy justice is a racial justice issue. It's an environmental justice issue. And it's also a children's issue. Children are disproportionately impacted. An article in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health noted that fossil fuel combustion byproducts are the world's most significant threat to children's health and future, and a major contributor to global inequity and environmental injustice. It noted that it includes impairment of cognitive and behavioral development, respiratory illnesses, and other chronic diseases, all of which may be seated in utero and affect health and functioning immediately and over one's life course. I have a 7-year-old, and obviously, and her breathing, and many of her friends have asthma, right? And it is a challenge as they want to play outside, but the air quality is really impacted by the peaker plants that we have in our area. Wanted to share this video that really highlights our energy use and children's health, specifically students.
You would never let your kids do this. But every school day that your kids breathe polluted air is as bad for them as smoking cigarettes. In fact, air pollution affects our entire body, all the organs, and the brain. And kids' growing bodies and lungs are more vulnerable because they breathe more than adults. Let's talk numbers. Over 6 million kids attend school within a quarter-mile of a major roadway. 26 million kids travel on our nation's 480,000 buses back and forth to school each day. 95% of these buses emit diesel exhaust. Kids riding these buses are exposed to up to 4 times more air pollutants than the general population. Air pollution stunts lung growth, affects learning and behavior, increases risk of infections, and causes asthma, one of the leading reasons kids miss school. But it doesn't have to be this way. The solutions are here. Switching to clean, renewable energy and electric vehicles means kids and their caretakers can breathe easier. Healthy air improves kids' physical and mental health and their ability to learn. For caretakers, that means worrying less about your child's health, school performance, and the rising costs of healthcare. Your voice matters. Tell your leaders healthy air is healthcare.
My daughter is one of those millions, 26 million students that ride school buses to school, and she is on a diesel school bus, along with most of her classmates throughout New York City. And she mentions how awful it smells inside and outside. And so United Women in Faith have partnered with a number of organizations for the Healthy Air as Healthcare campaign. And that is really highlighting the connection between diesel school buses as well as air pollution and climate change. And so that is saying we want our school buses to be electrified. There's technology to do that. In the long run, it's actually the same price or less expensive to have an electric school bus. It's healthy for our kids' ears. And there's actually funding through Volkswagen settlement funds, as well through the bipartisan infrastructure package funds that were passed in November. But even that is insufficient. So that's why we need to tell our legislators, especially in Congress, that we need more funding. If we care about children's health, this is one very, very, very easy way that we can move forward. Okay, let me go to the next slide. And the great news with all of this is that a clean and renewable energy is possible. Sometimes if we were about maybe 100 years ago, we'd be having this webinar, it'd be like, okay, we don't have solutions. But in fact, right now we have solutions because of the technological advances. And so solar, wind, tidal, and small-scale hydro and geothermal are all renewable energy sources that, when done right, do less harm than our current energy mix of fossil fuels. The cost of solar and wind have both gone down by making it cheaper than coal, and technological developments in battery and storage have made renewable energy more reliable and a viable replacement to fossil fuels. And there's a lot we can talk about here, but I just wanted to note that. But that doesn't mean all of our energy sources are equally good. Let's return to our values. Does our energy system or energy source do no harm? Does it do good? And as was noted earlier by Carol, nuclear energy, while itself doesn't emit as much greenhouse gas emissions, has severe environmental justice and environmental consequences. And within the Book of Resolutions, it notes that the environmental human dangers of using nuclear must be considered, and so that it is not a safe form of energy. Woody biomass, while technically renewable, and so you see that here below as woody biomass, while technically renewable, right, because you can plant more trees, so it's replenishable, but it can release as much or even more than coal plants in greenhouse gas pollutions and air pollutants, toxins, more actually than coal plants, that have been disproportionately cited in Black communities in the Southeast. Right, so again, racial injustice is happening. These woody biomass plants are intentionally going into Black communities in Georgia and North Carolina and Alabama. Given the time limitations, I won't be going into more detail, but I would invite you to listen to our webinars on these topics where we bring in different speakers around nuclear and concerns about woody biomass. And the fourth reason why just energy for all, a just energy system is not guaranteed. Even if we change the source of our energy from fossil fuel and nuclear to pollution-free energy, it takes me to this fourth point. Our current energy system is not just. And here is a quote: "We believe everyone has a right to safe and affordable energy. The cost of energy can place a heavy burden on low-income families. Growing up, even when it reached in the high 90s in New York City, our family didn't use an AC. And that was available in our rental unit because we couldn't afford it. And I remember visiting my relatives in Korea, and it was over 100 degrees, and with my daughter who was 2 then, and they didn't have an AC. And so cows were dying in the nearby area, and we had to leave the apartment because it was so hot. And we were trying to find AC coffee shops, right, that had a limit in how long we can stay, right, 2 hours at a time. And then we would go to the supermarket just to stay cool. It would be a choice for our family when I was growing up between paying the electricity bills, rent, food, or other household necessities, and an issue for millions of people throughout the United States. When households use over 6% of their income in energy bills, they are experiencing energy burden. In the United States, the average household pays about 3.6% of their income in energy bills. That's for gas or electricity, water, others. 5 states have the highest low-income energy burden: Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, and Georgia and Arkansas, where low-income households will use 63% more electricity than the low-income national average. And this is because of energy inefficiencies, a lot of other issues that are going on. In Knoxville, 26.5% live in poverty, above the state average of 16.1%. And some households have been estimated to have an energy burden rate as high as 30% of their income in utility bills. Imagine that, 30%. So, a little more than 3 months of your earnings, if you earn, a month of your earnings, 3 months of your energy bill, a little more than that is used entirely based on your 1 month's income. What if you're behind by 1 month's rent, of energy bill, or 2 months, 3 months, right? Then it leads to shutoffs because there is no universal guarantee of minimum energy protection, even when it's 100 degrees outside, even when it's so cold and you need basic necessities to stay safe. So there are choices that communities, our sisters and brothers, families in our own United Women in Faith communities are facing. And it also has been exacerbated by many utility boards increasing their monthly fees. And my understanding is that in Knoxville, the Knoxville Utilities Board, for example, has increased their monthly fees for the past decade. And it's not even their increased use, it's just the fees that are increasing. So it increases energy burden. We can see the intersections of energy and racial and economic justice by who are experiencing energy burdens in the United States. Throughout the US, about 1/2 of all low-income households and about 1/2 of all Black households have trouble paying their electricity energy bill or maintaining adequate heating and cooling. A significant percentage of those households are renters, like me when I was growing up, paying utilities where landlords have little incentive to weatherize or install energy efficient upgrades that would drastically reduce the energy bills, right? And during the pandemic, while many families and households were facing utility shutoffs and children who needed to go to school virtually didn't have access to the energy to connect to the computer, right? To get to school and school learning. So then the disparity increased furthermore. And the utilities and many of the investor-owned utilities actually saw increases and shareholder increases, and CEOs were paid significantly more than the previous years, right? Where is justice in this process? Does our energy system as we have it do good and do no harm? I wanted to share this quote from Jackie Patterson. She has spoken at many United Women in Faith events. She's the former senior director at NAACP's Environmental and Climate Justice Program. She's currently now the executive director of the Chisholm Legacy Project. And she notes this in the NAACP's Lights Out in the Cold report. The cost benefit analysis of how the utility business model is structured around utility shutoffs in the face of such wealth building focus means a choice of life and death for some and the choice between a Porsche and an Audi for others. We're not saying that people don't have a right to a Porsche or an Audi, but surely there needs to be some protection, minimum protections for those who need refrigeration for life-saving medication that needs to be refrigerated, right? Or for food. So I've shared a lot thus far, and I want to pause here. I've given you 4 reasons thus far why we should care about just energy for all. Out of core values, scripture, and Methodist call, that our energy system is harming God's creation and people, that a renewable energy system exists, possibility exists, and that even if we go there, that a just energy system is not guaranteed. So take a moment to reflect on these questions. How does our energy system align or not with your values and God's call for creation care? From what was shared, what areas are you most concerned about? What is impacting your community? And I know we have various types of processors, so I just want to give us a time to reflect, because our goal is not for you to get a bunch of head knowledge and information, and then after the session, you're like, okay, that was good. Let me go on to my next thing. So let's just pause and take a moment to reflect. you might still be writing, but we are actually going to go into our next breakout session and invite you to share about these points. And if you could share about 2 to 3 minutes per person, and we'll make this a 7-minute. I know that that was probably not enough time. And I appreciated Ms. Anna's comment that it is not enough time when I had said we have sufficient time. I was just commenting on that with regards to the time we had until 12 o'clock. So I hope you had some good conversation. And if you would like, please type in the chat box some things that you either shared or you heard that was important to you. So as you're typing, I'm just going to move us on to our final reason of why we should care about just energy for all. Number 5, last but not least, I am part of the energy system and I can be part of the solution. As we talked about before, most of us are connected. And we have one partner that we speak with, Dr. Ann Mellinger Birdsong, who worked with the CDC before, now is with Mothers and Others for Clean Air. And she had said, it's different from smoking. A person to stop lung cancer and being poisoned by smoking, they just need to stop smoking cigarette, right? That's the result. But air pollution, unlike smoking, it's a collective problem and requires a collective systemic response. And so individual action alone does not always make the impact that we need because it's a deeper problem in terms of our energy system. So if we want to have an energy system that does no harm, does good, it is insufficient to just advocate for replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy alone. As Christians who are called to care for God's creation, to love our neighbors as ourselves, we have an opportunity to not only address the climate change crisis and air pollution, but also to make our energy systems more accessible, more affordable, more just. And that's actually laid out in the energy policy statement of the Mission U Book of Resolutions. And so it notes, we support increased government funding for research and development of renewable energy sources and elimination of fossil fuel subsidies. We encourage the development and deployment of renewable energy technologies and government incentives to speed the application of resulting technologies to our energy needs. The greatest national and international efforts should be made in the areas of conservation and energy sources. And I'm going to go to this slide. On the left, you see an extractive economy. That is our current energy system. And this is where the resources of extraction, of dig, burn, dump, and communities, there are communities of color, low wealth communities, indigenous communities that are disproportionately impacted. There's exploitation often of the workers who are not fairly protected, of the communities there. Consumerism, colonial mindset. The wealth, again, of our energy system is given to very few and burden on many others. And there's militarization. And we can move towards a regenerative economy. And I note this because I think it's important to think about what is the energy future that we want, right? What is the vision that God is calling us to? And these are not exactly our words within United Methodist Church or even Christianity, but I think it resonates. And this was created by the Climate Justice Alliance, their Just Transition Principle, that it's a worldview of caring and sacredness, of cooperation, that there's democracy, that I have the choice in terms of the energy sources that I use, that there's a regenerative energy economy, right? And the energy sources that we're using of wind, solar, and that there's ecological and social well-being in that process. Oh, sorry. And so the invitation to you is, we can be part of that solution And we can make this a reality. And again, individual action is important because we could reduce our emissions, but such as changing my light bulb, going solar. But again, it requires a fundamental change. All of us are in some ways connected to our energy system. And to do that fundamental change, we need legislation and funding and investments to help us transition to a just energy future. So let me give you an example personally. I live in an apartment building. The apartment is heated by oil, and most of our stoves in the building is powered by gas. I can't just go to renewable energy because of the reality of the system. And we've talked in the building about, because it's a co-op, about moving towards renewable energy, but it's very expensive, right? So the desire is there. New York State has really ambitious policies around reductions of emissions, justice, and they have all of these commitments, but they haven't been funding it because they say they have no money and they're redirecting their funding elsewhere, right? So this is where deep investments at the federal level can be really useful. And this is why for several years now, we've been advocating at the federal level, and specifically with this administration and this Congress, to pass climate investments, right? We've been asking for $550 billion in investments. It's not even, it sounds like a lot, but it's actually not, all of that amount is not even enough to electrify the entire school bus systems, right? So we're saying we need to do more, because if we want to change our homes, if we want to meet zero emissions by 2050 and phase out fossil fuels, there's a lot of work that needs to happen. And we need funding. For me, we need to, because I also have a gas car that we park in the streets, the only way I could move towards renewable energy is for a building to be retrofitted so our heat can be generated by electricity, that the electricity comes from renewable energy, that the charging stations become more accessible and affordable for electric vehicles to be affordable because it's way too expensive, and for the electricity to be from renewable. Schools might be interested in electric school buses, and I noted they're cheaper to maintain in the long run, but they don't have the funds, right? So it's not the technology that's actually holding us back, but rather funding, policies, and political will. Currently, fossil fuel companies are receiving huge subsidies. And so instead of giving fossil fuel companies subsidies, those subsidies can be directed towards homes, buildings, churches, to be retrofitted, to run on electricity. And many of our utilities systems and public service commissions need to make stronger renewable energy commitments. There is an organization or a coalition, Clean Up TVA coalition, demanding immediate action from the Tennessee Valley Authority to drastically increase their ambition. Liz spoke about their ambitions already. Great start. They're saying we need to do more. And TVA has ambitions, but it's not even as ambitious as other states in the Southeast in terms of their targets towards renewable energy. We also want to ensure that there's equity in that process. So what are some things that you can do? Well, our goal within United Women in Faith this year and beyond is to educate and advocate. We want to make sure our voices are heard, that climate justice and just energy solutions must be prioritized and funding. So some of the things that we encourage you to think about and do is connect climate justice to your context and how environmental justice communities are particularly being impacted. Reach out to your elected officials, your candidates. This is an election year, companies, church leaders. They need to hear this message again and again. And we want them, again, to pass ambitious climate legislation that is centered on equity and justice. We know there are communities that are disproportionately being impacted. That's where funds need to go. What are some ways that we can participate? Well, we should get grounded and equipped. Find out about just energy issues and 100% renewable energy campaigns in your state and community. What are those existing policies? How is it impacting your community? What changes are needed? So think about your state and local municipality. Use your gifts and assets. Each of you have your own networks, contacts, and gifts. Some of you are social media gurus, others are writers, others are educators. Some in your professional careers, you relate to these issues on various ways. So think about how you can use your gifts and assets to advance just energy for all and use that to make an impact. And it's really key to talk about it with your friends, family, church, not only during Earth Day, but consistently and regularly. If you are a writer, consider writing a letter to the editor and opinions. And we have many partner organizations who create drafts that we can use. So reach out to us if you're looking for drafts. Create opportunities to increase conversations and put a spotlight on the issues. And don't do it alone. As United Women in Faith, connect with state and local organizations already advancing just energy for all and climate justice. Join their events, participate. Invite them to join and speak at your groups and do trainings. Join coalitions that have common goals to advance climate justice and just energy for all. And here are some organizations I would recommend. Look out for the environmental justice organizations in your state and region. The Interfaith Power and Light groups. So Tennessee Interfaith Power and Light, Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. At the national office, we've connected with all of them. The Southeast Clean Energy Network, they're an amazing group of faith-based climate, environmental, civil rights organizations, and community organizations that come together. As your group, you may want to join and become a member. United Women in Faith National have been invited, but we want to make sure that we have our own members joining. So if you want to participate, let us know. NAACP has their environmental and climate justice committees that you can join. We've partnered with them regularly. Moms Clean Air Force, Mothers and Others for Clean Air, Mothers Out Front. Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And I was just talking about the Clean Up TVA Coalition as well. So those are just some examples. When you look for organizations, ask about not only about their commitment about climate, but around equity and justice, and see if other environmental justice communities are in that larger group and coalition. Because there's many who say we need to address the climate crisis, but it's often at the cost and the lives and the health of communities of color and low wealth communities. So we want to avoid NIMBYism, which is not in my backyardism, right? We want to avoid that. And at the national level, we have opportunities. Sign up for climate justice updates. So you get regular updates from our office. Join the monthly Just Energy for All webinars, which is every third Wednesday of the month at 3 p.m. Eastern. Join the monthly Just Energy for All working groups again, where we have folks who are working on these issues, who are sharing and learning, and get involved in national actions. There are two particular I wanted to share. One was, as I noted before, the action around Congress to pass ambitious climate legislation. We've been working on this for quite some time, but over the next several months into July and August will be of critical time. If you click on this link, it will take you to a page, and we'll email it to you, and I'll put it in the chat box in just a minute. This link will give you a place to write a letter to your senators and congressional representative, and also let you call your member of Congress. It's the weekend right now. You can just leave a message and they will hear it and tally it. They need to hear from us. We're not doing this as a political issue. We do this as people of faith, deeply concerned about our environment, the air, and also people's health. The other action I want to invite you to consider is our engagement with the regulatory process. Heavy-duty vehicles make up a huge portion of air pollution, and these are trucks, buses. So they're only 4% of vehicles on the road, but they're 25% of total transportation. I'm not sure if you're like me, but if I'm on the road on a highway, if there's a truck in front of me, I try to avoid it. Why? Emissions are terrible, right? And it's not only for our health, because even if you do the internal air, it still seeps in, and I'm breathing that in. And I have asthma, so it's a huge issue. But it's also terrible for the environment. So we're asking EPA, they're receiving public comments. We're asking them for strongest emissions because its impact on health of children and communities of color and low wealth communities, that it's actually cheaper in the long run. and because of climate change. So if you type UWF trucks in to this number 52886, you can actually, it'll direct you. So text UWF trucks in 52886. I put that in. Okay. So in closing, there is so much that we have an opportunity to do. For such a time as this, we have the possibility to be part of healing God's creation. What a gift that God gives us. And Jesus came. We're people of the resurrection. Jesus came to bring healing to this earth, died for that, invites us into that glorious work, which no doubt is very challenging at times, but what a privilege, because there are solutions that exist. So my question to you for you to reflect on is, what are you taking with you? What is one thing that you want to learn about? How will you incorporate this into your prayer life? And what is one action you can take this week? So thank you so much for your time, your commitment to caring for God's creation, and for the hosting conference for United Women in Faith, for your work and faithfulness. And I look forward to being in partnership and celebrating with you in the work that you do.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your commitment to learning and engaging with us today. And now I call upon Host and Conference to take action. And Liz has given us all of these wonderful, the summary of wonderful things we can do, and how she has already challenged us. So I won't do that again, but I will ask for you to look forward to taking up a plan of how we can work in Host and Conference to follow up. So that is what I wanted to say to you. So how can we use this new knowledge and be a positive influence and to lead our conference, our local units, our districts, our congregation, our annual conference, into moving forward on this work. Liz has already told you in the social principles. So here's the book that you can see there. And from Church and Society, the Climate Justice, the Biblical Standpoint of What's What. I'm gonna make sure that everyone gets a copy of this. And then our book of resolutions. So these are wonderful resources that we'll be coming back to be able to act upon. I want to say thank you, Liz, for being with us and being available to us. I know Margaret has already told you thank you, but I wanted to be sure and thank you again. Thank you to Tim for being our tech person. We love having you to be with us, and to Carol and Bill and to Liz. Thank you for participating with us in this program. We will make this available to others, so we'll again and again and again be nourished by the words that were given to us today. I am going to turn it back over to you, Liz, for our closing words.
Thank you, Ms. Donna. I'm going to be closing us in the closing prayer from Creation Justice Ministries Earth Day Resource, Weathering the Storm. So please join me in prayer. Creator, forgive us for our sins against you and your creation. In your name, may we turn from our sins and work towards a new creation, one in which all creatures are freed from the bondage of greed and accumulation and are able to flourish into their creatureliness. May this church, may this United Women in Faith community be a site of redemption, resilience, and hospitality, an extension of your love to all who are affected by the climate crisis. In this land, this structure, this community, this worship, and in our lives, may we love you more fully by seeking justice for our neighbors, both humans and non. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.